All right. Okay, guys, before we get going, I wanted to see what y'all thought about I had an idea that I wanted to pitch. It's Halloween time and there's all these scary horror movies. So I was thinking, like, how cool would it be if, like, 153B was possessed and it would talk to you with the chalkboard? But it wasn't like bad possessed. It just, like, wanted to talk smack. Like, the ink would change and it would be like, "Do you even lift, bro?" or something like that, and or it'd be like, just to mess with you, like, "I saw what you did on 310 exam 2," like stuff like that. Or, "Do you even pronate?" Yeah, just thought that, like, be really interesting for a movie. All right, shoulder, triaxial fallen socket, right? Triaxial means it can move about three axes at any given time. I just want to make sure we're on the same page about this. So sometimes it's confusing. What's triaxial? We have six motions, but we got this variation of ab and adduction. So does that mean we have eight movements? And so I just want to be clear. The reason I keep saying six is because you only have six options at a time. I think we had talked about that, right? So in anatomical, you have two motions in the sagittal, two motions in the frontal, two motions in the transverse. But if you're abducted, you still have six options. You have two motions now in the global frontal. You have two motions now in the global. You have two motions, right. You have two motions in the global sagittal. You have two motions in the global frontal. And you have two motions in the global transverse. So I think in last class, I was like, guys, you can't flex and extend from this position. You got to travel, and then you can do that. And you can't ab and adduct from this position. So I know it sounds tricky, but it's still triaxial, even though there are eight options, is what I want to make sure you understand. Like, it's not quadraxial or something. Radial ulnar joint, uniaxial pivot. We learned about that one, and we're going to do some more practice today. Elbow. I didn't really talk about the elbow because it was kind of on the first test, but it's a uniaxial hinge. It's a uniaxial hinge. So just like the knee except modified, if you remember how the knee was modified to be able to have medial and lateral rotation when the knee's bent, elbow's not like that. We don't need it because we have the radial ulnar joint to do our bidding for us if we need to reposition the hand. So classic hinge, classic uniaxial hinge. So flexion is going to get you in the fetal, extension is going to get you out of fetal. We don't want the elbow to move like this. If the elbow moves too much, I mean, you may have a little bit of play, but that's not significant motion. But if your elbow like says, "Hey, I would love to see what traveling down the frontal road is, so let me just have abduction." That's valgus stress, and it's a sprain or dislocation of the ulnar column. So we don't want frontal plane motion of the elbow. So elbow, uniaxial hinge, flexion, and extension. And I'm going to talk about these real quick, and I'm going to tell you what you're going to need to know. Your fingers, for the purposes of this class, flexions and extensions, getting into grips. The opposable thumb is really cool, where they flexion of the wrist, flexion of the elbow, flexion of shoulder, party favor. But the fact that this is what they call an opposable thumb, meaning the flexion getting into a ball, as the fingers come down relative to how you see it, the thumb's actually going to go up, and that helps create compression. That helps to create grip. That's kind of cool. So like as the fingers come one way, the thumb goes the other way so that they can compress easier. So when they say oppositional thumb, it's flexing in the opposite direction relative to the fingers. That's all that means. Okay. And just like we can have flexions and extensions and abductions and adductions in our shoulders, it's the same for our metacarpal phalangeals, our fingers right here, our knuckles. Our knuckles can flex and extend, and then they can also ab and adduct. But what's cool is when you abduct and adduct your fingers, it's relative. The mirror is now your middle finger. So in other words, we don't say these are coming to the midline. That's one thing, and these are going away from the midline. That's another thing. They're all doing the same thing because it's relative to the middle finger. So this would be like lateral flexion, This would be lateral extension, abduction, adduction. So we keep it simple. Gripping gets you in the fetal. Extending gets you out of fetal. Abduction gets you movement away. These I don't mind saying midline because you can't literally abduct like you can the shoulder, but it's away from the middle finger. It's lateral flexion to the middle finger. So I just wanted to talk about, and then you have your interphalangeals, you have DIPs, PIPs. If you grip, you're flexing. And remember, I have to teach you this because for the wrist can be in a lot of different positions based off of the radial joint. So the easiest way to find wrist flexion when everything is confusing is to follow the fingers. The fingers have to roll with the wrist flexion because the wrist doesn't twist. So anytime you're lost and you're like, I'm not quite sure, just follow the fingers. Fingers flex, follow that to the wrist and it'll show you the wrist flexion. Follow the fingers to the wrist flexion. All right, so with that being said, let's get to the wrist. So the wrist is a biaxial ellipsoid joint. Fun name. Biaxial, how many planes can it move in? 2, good. How many axes can it move about? 2, how many motions are we going to have to? 4, not 5. Sagittal, we got that covered. In the fetal, out of fetal. This is where it can get confusing depending on how you learned it, depending on what you're introduced to. Lots of students, I'm like a kinesiology therapist. I'm trying to recondition your brain. It's not that what you were taught might have been wrong. It just wasn't a functional, completed story to what can happen. So example, you might have learned flexion is when the fingers go forward. I can make my fingers go forward and I don't have flexion. I can pronate and flex and my fingers go back. I can flex and my fingers go to the side. There's a lot of different ways to flex and your fingers not go forward. I can flex and my fingers go down. I can flex and my fingers go up, right? So we have to remember what is flexion, getting you into fetal. And the fingers can help get you into fetal by flexing, and the wrist can help get you into fetal by flexing. If you were going to get into a ball, you would flex your fingers and flex your wrist and flex your elbow and flex your shoulders. You wouldn't be like, heads up, ah! Okay. So wrist flexion and wrist extension. We're going to be in different positions, radial ulna. Sometimes I might be here. You can do a lot of things with the Etch-a-Sketch. But the simple trick is just follow the fingers. That's why I let off with the fingers. Just follow the fingers. The finger flexion will show you the wrist flexion. And the reason it will always do that is because the wrist can't rotate in its transverse plane. You can't make the palmar surface of your hand somehow be on the dorsum side of your forearm. You can. That's what we call in medicine a bad day. A bad day. Okay. All right, frontal plane. I think, I have a theory on this, but you can't go to the well too dry. That made no sense whatsoever. Maybe I need to take another sip of water. You can't go to the well too many times. And there's precedent for this. When we were going over the shoulder girdle, and I was like, the scapula articulates with several joints. So we don't want to say things like scapuloclavicular, humeroclavicular, scapulothoracic. Like you don't want to use the same bone name too many times because it gets confusing. So they'll use a acromioclavicular, knowing that it's still a part of the scapula, but you're not overusing that word. Does that make sense? Okay. So I think that's why wrist motions don't have the obvious answer to them like ab and adduction, because you have these ab and adductions already. And if you have other ab and adductions with the ab and adductions, I think sometimes that could be confusing. Add with an ab, So they go with ulnar and radial deviation. So those are the two movements of the wrist in the wrist frontal plane. Okay. It also could be the type of joint, meaning that for ball and sockets or even these condyloids, these knuckles, they are biaxial, but they actually can passively move in the third plane. Like you can take your knuckles and passively rotate it. You just don't have any muscles that can do it for you. So it also could be where you have abduction called for the sake of, we could have horizontal abduction. But for the wrist, you can't do that. So for those reasons, probably you have these motions called radial and ulnar deviation. Super easy to see and identify. Super easy to see and identify. We had the thumb rule for the radial ulnar joint. What do y'all think the thumb rule works? Has that been helpful? Okay. I don't want to, I'd be a hypocrite if I'd say, well, we're also going to call this the thumb rule. No, we already have a thumb rule. So we're going to use this and say the pinky rule. For the wrist frontal plane motion, we're going to have a pinky rule. And the pinky rule is the pinky will always be ulnar side. In terms of bilateral side to side, pinky will always be ulnar side. It can't not be, unless you have a massive dislocation or some type of medical emergency. So look, we can do an experiment. I have my pointer finger on the pinky and I have my middle finger on the ulna. And no matter what I do, the pinky side will always be ulnar side. Now the opposite is also true. The thumb side will always be the radial side. But we already used the thumb rule, so I didn't want to double dip with second thumb rule. So we're going to give the pinky some love. So what happens in the frontal plane is when we deviate towards the pinky side, that's called ulnar deviation. And when we deviate towards the thumb side, we call that radial deviation. Ulnar, radial. That may work for some people. I'm always trying to pitch different ways to see this because we don't all see things the same way. Some people may say, well, I don't like to use the extremes. You could use the middle finger because the middle finger literally is kind of neutral in the middle. And if the middle finger deviates towards the ulnar side, it's ulnar deviation. And if the middle finger deviates towards the radial side, it's radial deviation. And sometimes you won't see the fingers at all. So you might have to go for knuckles. This is the pinky knuckle, or this is still the pinky, this is still the thumb. Ulnar, radial, ulnar, radial, ulnar, radial. Okay. Radial and ulnar deviation are very important when we do functional movements that involve gripping, right? So let's take that upright row that we were doing to look at supination as we come up. So if I want to keep my grip and I'm moving it up, look how I would have ulnar deviation. It helps me to keep my functional circle of grip under things. If you were grabbing a carton of milk and you wanted to pour it, you'd probably use ulnar deviation. If you were smacking a hammer to get that last whip, use ulnar deviation. Deviation towards the ulnar. Cool? Any questions? So, excuse me. So these motions at the wrist are pretty basic. What gets complicated is when we combine them with other things, right? So that's why we have to use those landmarks and see where am I at, where did I go, how did I have to move to get there. So in other words, on the test, I might do something like this. You say, okay, well, pinky side, deviation to the pinky side, bilateral wrist, ulnar deviation. But then Campbell might do something like this. Shake the etch-a-sketch. And instead of trying to memorize, just go with the landmarks. You know what a pinky is, you know what a thumb is. Went pinky side, son of a gun, he went pinky side. That was bilateral on the deviation. This was the exact same thing as this. But, I mean, I could do it like this. I could do it like this. So it doesn't matter. If you know what a pinky is, which I know you do, and you know where the thumb is, which I know you do, you know, these trickier radial and ulnar deviation questions aren't that tricky. You know what you're looking for, and you know how to apply the concepts. You'll be able to figure it out. Cool. All right. Would y'all prefer, if we did some practice, where are you feeling least confident? Shoulder, scapula, radial ulna, like from the upper extremity stuff. Where are we feeling we could use a little bit more work? I'm still kind of confused the scapula. On the scapula, okay. So, and I'm still confused. So the scapula is strange. One of the limitations with the scapula is it's hidden, right? Like, you know, even a magician who has a sleight of hand has his hand is out for us to see. This stuff is in our thorax. It's a lot harder to see. So what we have to do is we have to look for clues. And one of the clues is like, if I was doing shrugs, I know, that's where you come to school. That's where you come to class. That's why you pay for your education. I know this isn't shoulder. I know, because the shoulder can do this and this, this and this, this and this. The shoulder can't do this. So something like going up and down, I have to retrain my brain and say, okay, I know that can't be the shoulder joint magically going up and down. The shoulder socket is part of the scapula, it's part of the shoulder girdle, and that must be going up and down, and the shoulder is attached to it, so it's moving with it, and the elbow is attached to it, so it must be moving with it. The wrist is attached to it, so it's going with it. It's almost like the scapula is an elevator, and all of the people that are inside are going along for the ride. So scapular elevation and depression, for the purposes of this class, is when the scapula is helping your functional circle. And when I say functional circle, it's just a term to do function. I'm working in the yard. I'm picking up a wheelbarrow. I'm picking up a bucket, right? So the scapula elevation, like an elevator, right? Bringing your scapula up. Now, what's happening to the scapula itself? Scapula is sitting flush against the thorax. That's why they call it the scapulothoracic articulation. It's not like a joint that has a water balloon and ligaments and fluid. It's held here by muscles and a suction cup mechanism. It's called negative pressure, but that's a fancy word of just saying suction cup. So you have intrathecal pressure here, keeping this thing in. And when you elevate and depress, the scapula sitting on the back and the collarbone in the front is just doing this. It's like you put your hand on your collarbone and then go up and down. You feel your collarbone going up and down. Because all of this is connected to your thorax here. So ups and downs, scapula elevation and depression. And functionally, it's to help us get things up and higher. Then we have protraction and retraction. That's when your scapula orbits the ribs forward and back, but it's attached to your collarbone, so you can feel if you go protraction and retraction, you can literally feel your collarbone do this and this. Okay. Scapular protraction and retraction is really good to help get our hands a little further across or a little further back. Like last night in the football game, if you're trying to reach back for a pass, your shoulder can help get you there, but your scapula can help you get you a little further back. That little bit of extra. If you remember, our pelvis can help us do some things, but the pelvis is not technically, but attached on both sides, so they can't independently move. The pelvis, they have to go together, right? All this is like literally taking like a clamshell, cracking it in half. It's saying now I have two independent scapulas that can move. I don't have to move them together. I don't have to move the right and the left. I can move them independently, and this is what that would look like. Down here, the right and left pelvis is attached at the pubic symphysis, right? Well, here, my right and left shoulder girdle is attached to the manubrium of the sternum, so they're independent. They're not connected together. They're independent of each other. So the left and the right can move independently. But the concept is very similar to the pelvic curves. So we have scapula can help me go a little bit higher, retraction, a little bit back, retraction, higher, lower. And it's not just about movement, it's about muscles too. Like if I was trying to push something, my scapular protraction pullers can help me push. If I'm trying to pull something, my scapular retractors can help me push. And we're going to get into that in 415 biomechanics. But then the last one, and this is the tricky one, is how can the scapula, I get the up and down and forward and back, but there's a different way that the scapula can help get my hand up. And I'm not saying linearly, not like an elevator, like a clock. The scapula can help reposition my shoulder so that my arm can get to 12 o'clock globally. So in other words, for me to get over my head right here, like if I wanted to, paint a Warhammer figure or something like that, if I wanted to get my hand over here, I can't do all that with my shoulder. My shoulder joint only gets me by itself about here. I only have about 120 degrees of abduction with my shoulder. The rest of it is the scapula upwardly rotating in order to get my hand. Can see. Because once you feel it, it's like, okay, I got it. So your scapula right here, just wrong. So let's do elevation to bring it up. Yeah, perfect. Let's do retraction. Go back, like bring your shoulder blades back, like pinch your shoulder. Okay, that's retraction, not protraction. Now we're going to do upper rotation. Slowly bring your arms up over your head. Like to the side. Let's go to the side first. All the way up, all the way up, all the way up. Come back in. What's happening? So it's almost like your body. If you were trying to get your arm up, but all you could go is 90 degrees, but you needed to get your hand a little, you could lean to the side, and your hand would go up higher. Your shoulder's still at 90 degrees. You lean, it goes up high. It's kind of like what your scapula is doing. You only go up so much, and then your scapula leans, and you can get up. It leans, and you can get up higher. That's up. The upper rotation of the scapula is literally just the scapula leaning so that you can get your hand up high. Yeah. Any other follow-up questions? That's important. Now, on the test, it's very fair. Well, how are you going to, how will we know? And so what I tried to explain is that if I'm asking about elevations and depression questions, I'm going to try not to incorporate the shoulder movement. Like it'll just be, like you're doing, like I think we did some examples. You're doing push-ups, you keep your arms straight and you protract or retract. The shrugs. When I'm asking you about the upward and downward rotation specifically, I'm going to incorporate what it's there to help with. Again, the upward and downward rotation of the scapula is meant to, this is your shoulder, this is your scapula. This is my right. Technically, it's like. So my shoulder's like, hey, I'm trying to get my hand, I'm trying to grab something and I need to get my hand over my head. And the shoulder's like, okay, dude, I can get you that far. And the scapula's like, okay, no problem. I'm just going to lean a little bit and get you all the way there. That's what's happening. The scapula is leaning. Cool. Follow-up questions? If you had, I think I mentioned this last class, there's conditions called frozen shoulder where you have glenohumeral joint injury and it scars down, you don't rehab it right, and all that scar tissue prevents you from moving. It's like it's frozen. You can still have 60 degrees of global abduction, but it's not coming from your glenohumeral joint. It's coming from your scapula, literally. And if you don't know that, you may say, patient presents with 60 degrees of shoulder abduction. But the patient has 0 degrees of shoulder abduction, and all that motion is literally just the scapula upwardly rotating and the arm going along to the right. Thank you for that question. Is there any other upper extremity things that you want me to reteach or the shoulder? Okay. So the shoulder and the hip, I'm going to emphasize shoulder, but they follow the same rules. They're both triaxial ball and socket joints. Sagittal plane, we're looking at flexions and extensions, getting you in the fetal, getting you out of fetal. Okay. Flexion from, extension to, extension from, flexion to. Frontal plane, we're looking at abs and ads. Away, or away, I don't like necessarily away, because you can keep abducting and come back. So I like to introduce it as lateral flexion. That's what they used to call it. So it's like, oh, I see what's happening. I'm just trying to get to fetal down a different road. So lateral flexion is just abduction. But from here to there, I'm closer to fetal than I was down here. Okay. I do not mind making a silly goose out of myself for the sake of education. Kevin, the Wi-Fi is out. But I'm telling you, some students, I don't like it. I don't like it. Some students will miss the ab and the ab because those thorn letters so close, and it gets confusing. I got confused which one was ab and which one was ad. So I'm warning you. So that's why I do silly things when I practice, like A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B, A, D, A, D, A, D, A, D. You may use things like AD is down. You just have to be careful. It looks like it's moving and it is. Yes. But remember when we did the pull-up example? Right? So in other words, you just have to take my word for it. But if I had a fully functioning pull-up bar at my age and stamina, I could probably do 100 pull-ups. No, that's an exaggeration. 200 pull-ups. No pull-ups. All right, maybe no pull-ups. But remember when we did the pull-ups, guys? Me pulling myself up. Let's see how I could do this. The things I do for education. Let's pretend. Me pulling myself up actually meant my scapula rotated down. Let's think a change in position. Am I abducted in my start? Which means my scapula have to be upwardly rotated when I start. True? The scapula has to be leaning. So if I start with my scapula upwardly rotated, and I end here, the scapula has to downwardly rotate. It actually looks pretty cool in the video because you can't see me cheating. So it actually looks like 205. Does that make sense? So again, these these names and these rules are, try to use precedent, lefty loosey and righty tighty evolved because you're always going to move the cap about the bottle. There's no functional reason to go the long way. So you develop these rules in our brains that are mechanically driven. That door is going to always move about the wall in the same way. Bodies don't follow those same rules. We can move doors about walls, and we can move walls about doors. And it drove my engineering friends crazy. So even though we could say add is down, it's still going down while I pull myself up. If this was a lat pulled down, wouldn't this be the same motion as this? The same motion. It gets me to the same place. My elbows are not by my side. I'm doing a lat pull down. My elbows are not by my side. My elbows are now by my side. Based off of everything I've been teaching you for 2 months, shouldn't that follow the same rules as my elbows are not by my side? Now my elbows are by my side. Those things have to be called the same thing because they got me to the same place. They may not have looked the same, but they had to be the same. Does that make sense? So don't confuse your abs and your adds. And then the last one is internal and external, or lateral or medial. We use those synonymously. Just because in the clinics, y'all are going to hear them synonymous. I taught it, or I like to look at it as, I like to start with things we know and we're comfortable with. If you asked a child to spin to their right, they're probably going to follow their right arm. Spin to your left. Well, our shoulders are kind of like that, except my shoulder doesn't have a right and a left, even though it has 2 sides. So how do we communicate the 2 sides of a side? Lateral and medial. Outstanding. That's what that means. It's just the side of a side. And so if I ask the same child who's now represented by my shoulder, hey, right shoulder, spin laterally. My right shoulder is going to follow the lateral side. Spin medially. So it's the same concept that we're, spin to the right, spin to the left, spin laterally, spin medially. Mirror effect, bilateral. So that's what lateral or external rotation and medial internal rotation means. And a couple other caveats while you think of any other questions is, remember, the general motion, general meaning a combination of straight line and rotation, that's these motions. They are governed, their planes and axes are governed by the sockets. In other words, this is shoulder flexion. Even if I'm externally rotated, this is shoulder flexion. This is abduction. Even if I'm internally rotated, this is abduction. The rotation is governed by the long bone. So that way, this is external, internal, 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 external, internal. Sense? I think in class I was like, which one doesn't belong? Apple, banana, strawberry, sledgehammer. I have 50-pound dumbbells, and I have 3 options to make a move. This isn't happening. This isn't happening. But I can make this happen. And I think I went even further. I was like, we have to do it that way because when you have triaxial joints, sequence and perspective matter to the bones. If we didn't have a communicated system, then we can make things like this happen. We could say, okay, flexion extension. Flexion extension is going to be from the humerus's perspective. But what that means is if I do this, now this is still flexion extension. You know what I'm saying? I think we used to hit like flexion extension. So for those triaxials, you have to say, it can't be, because anything can be anything. So we do a treaty a treaty of hip and shoulder, and we say, all right, sockets, you have sagittal and frontal, so that way the ab and adduction doesn't matter if you're internally or externally rotated. The flexion and the extension doesn't matter if you're internally or externally rotated. And the internal and external rotation matters when you're internal and external. That's why we do the things. All right, what else? How are we feeling on lower extremity?
Can you go over the pelvic girdles?
You had that one in the chamber, huh? Woo! Okay. Sure. Let me, instead of working down, instead of working up, I'm going to work down. So what I mean is we just went over the scapula. We talked about the independent motions of the scapula. But what if I took the scapula and said, hey guys, you can no longer work independently. I'm going to connect you. And now you have to work as one unit. Think of it as has anybody ever done a three-legged race? You know, or at least you know what that is, where you tie the inside foot together and you're forced to run as a unit. It's a three-legged race. So you have two independents, but they are connected in the middle. So therefore, they can't move independently. They have to move together. So the motions of the pelvic girdle, if, let's say my right scapula protracted and it was connected to my left, that meant my left scapula would have to retract. It's the same as transverse pelvic girdle rotation. The concept of if this one goes forward, this one has to go back is the same concept as transverse pelvic girdle rotation. As this one goes forward, this one has to go back. Okay. The concept of if this one elevates, this one has to depress. He did the mesh. That's the same concept as lateral pelvic girdle rotation, if you think about it. Because they can't move independently. They have to move together. The sockets have to move together. So we have transverse, we have frontal, and then we have sagittal pelvis. Okay. So the pelvic girdle rotation is our lower extremity version of scapular motion. That's all it is. But we can't move them independently. And so since they have to move together, we call it rotations because they have to move together about the center of mass and it's more pure spin. I think I used the basketball for example. So sagittally, the pelvis can rotate anteriorly or posteriorly. Frontally, we can have right or left lateral rotations and transversely right or left transverse pelvic rotations. And feel free to follow up. I'm just doing a summary. But if you remember, the pelvic girdle rotations are like, how did the basketball spin? Did the basketball want to roll to the right? Did the basketball want to roll to the left? That would be frontal. Did the basketball want to spin forward or spin back? That's sagittal. Or did I spin the ball in the transverse about my finger this way, or did I spin the ball that way? So the first question is, how did the basketball spin? Or was there spin? The follow-up question will always be, what spun the basketball? Because my pelvis, because it has proximal articulations at my hips, right hip, left hip, or both hips, and it has this, well, I guess with the midline, superior articulation with the spine. I could palm the basketball and make it spin from the top. That would be like making it spin because of trunk motion. Or I could spin the basketball with the hands on the bottom like my hips. That's what this would be. I could spin the basketball with my right hip. I could spin the basketball with my left hip. Or I could spin the basketball with both hips. So the two questions that I'm going to ask for those is, Was there pelvic girdle rotation? If so, what was it? You got 6 choices: anterior, posterior, and sagittal, right, left, lateral, or right, left, transverse. And then the second part is what joint motion was responsible or associated with that pelvic girdle rotation. And those are the questions we did in class were like, I think like for one of the first ones was like right transverse because of left hip external rotation. Because my right hip just went along for the ride. My right hip didn't move at all and stayed in an atomic. So my left hip spun the whole pelvis. Because the pelvis is connected, I cannot move the left socket and the right side not go somewhere. So that's the concept of pelvic girdle rotations, that you have one side, one joint side influences the movement on the other side because they're connected. We've done this one before. This is anterior pelvic girdle rotation because of right hip flexion. And this is posterior pelvic girdle rotation because of right hip extension. 2 separate questions. Did the pelvis spin? Yes. How? What spun it? What joint motion spun it? We did examples where we were swinging the back, internal rotations. It's like, here's what, stand up. Everybody stand up. Everybody stand up. Hey, I cut you a save. I didn't want you to be alone. This is important. Some people are going to miss this, even though we did it in class. It's tricky. Our brains want to tell us one thing. So I'm going to line up with you guys, and let's do both feet on the ground, and let's do left transverse pelvic girdle rotation, and try to identify how both of your hips rotate. And don't go for the instinct. Go with the clues of where you're at, where did you go, how did you have to move to get there. So the pelvic girdle rotation would be left transverse, correct? So you're standing, you have left transverse pelvic girdle rotation. Your left hip is internal or external?
Internal.
Outstanding. Internal. Do you see it? Do you see it? Awesome. The right hip would be external. Do you see it? And the Lord said, you must be seated. My preaching sounds a lot like Triple H. Anybody knows the rest? The game, Triple H. Was that helpful? Do you have a follow-up question?
It's just like I understand all the movements and stuff.
So I just wasted your time.
No,
I'm joking.
it was just like the left, this picture on the slideshow, like left or right lateral. Like I don't understand how to know which one.
Ah, what a great question. Let me see if I can help you. So, remember we did the, when we were doing the hip, and we said, hey kids, spin to your right or spin to your left. That made sense? Like spin to your right? Okay. Well, I'm going to get you, we're walking ourselves there. You and me. So pelvis, spin to your right, spin to your left, no problem. Pelvis, anterior roll, posterior roll, no problem. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take the same concepts and we're going to go frontal. If I ask the kid to do a cartwheel to their right, they would probably want to rotate this way to their right or a cartwheel to their left. So for the pelvis, right lateral spin is literally spinning the pelvis as if it was going to roll to the right. You see how that would be right spin? Grace likes to do pour. If the pelvis was a bucket and you did right lateral, you'd pour water out the right side. You see that? Left, you'd pour water out the left side. I'm a spinner. I like to think of if it would spin, it would roll off to your left. But some people see pour and some people see spin. Now, this comes in handy when, like, say I'm just standing on one hip. What would this be? Well, I could look at the spin and say right lateral. Or I could look at the pore and say right lateral. It could also look like this. I could look at the spin and say that's left lateral. Or I could look at the pore and say water's pouring out the left side. So it's the similar concept, just in a different plane. Right spin, left spin in the frontal plane. Because rights and lefts mean two things in two planes. Spin right, spin left transverse. To the right, to the left frontal. Is that better?
Yeah.
Awesome. You're very welcome. And they won't admit it, but I'm guarantee you some students are like, thank God, thank you for asking that question. Because this is tricky. This is tough. It's different. But that's why we're here. We are meant to learn tough things. Anything else? All right, I just want to go over the game plan one more time. I'm going to post Unit 3 lectures for those of you that want to delve into it. All it is introducing you to how muscles work mechanically. Muscles influence all these different joint motions through their context of contractions. That's the biggest thing I'm going to teach you as a professor. That we can't just say flexion is bicep, because I can have flexion and it be tricep, or I can have extension and it be bicep. So I have to teach you the context of contractions for these muscles that are influencing motion. But what I don't want to do is not also practice as much as we can and get you ready for Unit 2. So we're going to have our cake and eat it too. I'm going to post videos for next week, and then Grace is going to meet with you guys, and I'm going to be on the Zoom just like I did a couple weeks ago, and we're going to have lab days leading into Unit 2 exam, okay? We are investing time and energy into you guys, and I know y'all are going to pay it off with good understanding. Yeah, have a good weekend. So, thank y'all for those questions. And pretending to laugh at my possessed 153B joke. But that would be super funny, huh? Like,